Hi, welcome to the large intestine cleanse. This is going to be our preparatory week. We could call it week 0 because we haven't really started yet. And we could also call it a time to begin reflecting on where we're going. And this is Craig Lane with Health Alchemy. And we'll be going over for 5 weeks now, for this week, the week before the cleanse, and in the coming weeks, actually before week 1 starts, before week 2 starts, before week 3 starts, and then at the end of the cleanse, how to transition out. Those will be the 5 discussions going through this process. And I wish you all luck. I want to start with just this first slide and just a diagram of the colon and how the unified systems of the body work. And if you see here, right in the middle of the gut, you can see how many places and how many things the large intestine can actually affect. And I love this Alex Gray drawing. And if you notice, if any part of the colon is inflamed, especially the lower parts, it's going to affect the circulation from the legs coming back in the body. It's going to affect the pelvic function. Notice it crosses right through the bladder and the sex organs. Notice in the upper parts, it's going to affect the diaphragm and breathing. Notice along the sides, it can affect the sides of the body. Notice it can affect the spleen on the right side of the body, the liver on the left side of the body. And most people's colons is and are malformed and not functioning properly due to poor tissue turnover and nutrient deprivation. How do I know this? Because I see it in every client that comes into my office via the methods I have for assessment. So one of the things I've been working on consistently over the last 20 years in my life is purification, and not to be a fanatic about it, because there are fanatics out there. I've seen what happens to them when we over cleanse. Cleansing is viewed as a draining therapy in Chinese medicine. So the vectors of draining therapy are, dispersion. And if one gets too dispersed, then they no longer have enough chi or life force at the center. And that's what we're looking at, is how to maximize this, keeping pathways of circulation, detoxification going, and keeping nutrients coming in to build and build and build and build a healthy body, or at least renew. So welcome to the large intestine cleanse. This is the 4th seasonal cleanse this year, and these will be offered as packages. So if you want to focus on your kidneys, we have a winter one. If you want to focus on your liver, we have a spring one. If you want to focus on your small intestine, that's for the summer, and the large intestine is the fall. And in the seasonal transitions, there's also a chance to cleanse there via what's called the late summer or the earth element, and that's a good time also to do some short purifications a week before and after. So let's move on to slide 2. And really this one's more about, just my background primarily comes from Chinese medicine, but also any native or traditional healing model. And we're trying to pick out what works, what they were pointing at without the science, because science doesn't really explain much. It actually just points at things, and spiritual teachers are pointing at things. So it's interesting that the large intestine, one of its view is the rising sun. So, and if you look at slide 3 very quickly, you'll notice that 5 to 7 a.m. is when the large intestine is most active. And then you move back to slide 2 and you say, that's usually the time about the rising sun. In the summer, it's in our climate here in Santa Cruz, in this sort of area, we're looking at closer to 5 a.m. and then in the wintertime closer to 7 a.m. And there's an exercise there. You can read that, and I would highly recommend taking you up on it. My girlfriend loves to get up early with the sunrise. We do most mornings, even if we're tired, and we have certain days of the week where we just allow ourselves to sleep in. And just notice what goes on with the rising sun. And you don't have to analyze it. You don't have to. It's just sitting with what is. And there's some beautiful things that can happen inside of ourselves. So slide 3 gives us, so when the large intestine is least active, you'll note that in my life, in my exploration of this, as I've written at the end of this PowerPoint, we'll get to in part 2 of this recording, is the opposite time of any organ's most active is when it's least active. So you notice that 5 to 7 p.m. is when the large intestine is least active. And it's also the least likely time to have a bowel movement. I've discovered in my own body. I almost always have a bowel movement in the morning. Most people do that are healthy. And most people have a bowel movement after each meal. But the tendency I noticed in my life and in my clients is for most people, they tend to not have that time. So you could also see, like, so most of the digestive organs are active. If you notice, large intestine, stomach, spleen, and small intestine 1 to 3. Our most efficient digestive time is actually from 5 a.m. till about 1 to 3 p.m. And then after that, we're working on more detoxification. So just keep that in mind when we look at this. And this rising sun exercise on slide 2 is going to be very valuable for some of us. Just to get up once in a while early, even if it means taking a nap later, but just seeing, going out into traffic and seeing, like a downtown area, and also going around in nature and seeing the difference in the two. Slide 4, I'm going to let you read that. It talks about the same thing I just mentioned, and it's just a little bit from a website, and it's a really interesting read. Slide 5. So we're back to the characters that they used in China in their language, and it's interesting to note that the phonetic element of yang, or sun, is also shared with the small intestine, and that these two organs, they're viewed as yang organs because they bring in, or they shine out, nutrition to the rest of the body, to the yin organs. So the yin partner to the large intestine is the lung. The yin partner to the small intestine is the heart. And that's all of our breathing capacity and purification of the blood of the parts of our body. And it's our fastest and easiest way to purify is through the breath and keeping our connection with the cosmos through our breath, bringing things in, letting things go. Same thing in the large intestine, brings transformed matter from the microbes in our body into our cells and lets go of the waste. And we'll be talking about this a bit more. Slide 6. And it's interesting that the large intestine is a transmission of the way, because if we cannot discern and know which way is the path of wastefulness, especially in our own process, if there's waste blocking our way, then we can't follow that way, nor can we let go and move on to the next thing. So it's interesting that grief and sadness are two emotions associated with the large intestine and the lung, or the metal element in Chinese medicine. We'll be going over that a lot over the next 4 or 5 weeks in these PowerPoints, and really helping you have some experiences. As I say in my practice, part of alchemy is having an experience you cannot deny, or a transformation that you see in yourself or in how others see you. It's one of the things that really helps us solidify our health practice and self-care, is to have that experience that we can't deny. Slide 7 is just a little heads up here about the body's agenda is not necessarily comfort. It's not that way spiritually. It's not that way physically. It's not that way in our immune system. And we have this vital force. We could call it homeostasis, call it vital force, chi, prana. There's something at our essence. And one of the pointers I got in my life, in my essence, that was a great validation during a silent retreat was, my teacher said, notice that which has always been looking out through your eyes. It's just what makes you aware of the fact that I'm staring into a screen, the fact that you're watching me. What is that awareness? And notice your experience of that. And I noticed that there's this part of me that had never changed. And so we have rites of passage in our lives, and some of you are undertaking this cleanse maybe for the first time. And so what do you do when you're faced with discomfort? Do you run away and numb it? Or do you sit in the fire, so to speak, and burn it? And one of the things that I find about having not enough resources or tools in our toolbox is, imagine you could view the frog in the pond that slowly, the water slowly heats up, or the frog put into a stew pot, and it doesn't notice that the stew pot's getting hotter and hotter, so it adjusts and adjusts and adjusts. Just like our eyes will slowly adjust to dimmer and dimmer light, and at some point something triggers in us and says, gee, it's too dark to even function anymore. And so if it's a slow, gradual process, one of the things that we don't know, and it's one of the things I teach, is when we can see, like looking at our tongue, looking at our energy, looking at our moods, emotions, looking at various parts of our skin, things that we can easily observe in our eyes and how we breathe, left nostril, right nostril. There's things that we're not taught how to take care of and look for, and then we can make these adjustments more quickly and not go into quote-unquote diseases, or what the medical system labels us as having a problem. We tend to overtreat ourselves. We're on to slide 8 now. So when we overtreat ourselves, we take all the things mentioned on slide 8 here, and instead of like when we have a problem with our car dashboard, the light goes off, oil's low, we tend to fix the problem. But instead, we break the light in ourselves, and we're trained to panic the symptoms because that's the way the medical system has set it up for us. And then usually the doctors of old, more than 50 years ago, they were trained, you wait a lot of stuff out. And if it's long and it's severe, then you start to treat and you facilitate the body's process. Because remember, the body's not concerned with comfort. So one of the key high points of what I want you to get out of this PowerPoint today is that wait things out more. When you have a little itch, you don't treat it. And when you have a headache, maybe you shouldn't treat it. Maybe you should find ways to make the headache a little bit, like do a coffee enema instead of taking a pain medication. The coffee enema gets at one of the reasons why there's a headache. Or finding ways to move your chi. You can put magnets on your head. You can get acupuncture. You can do self-massage. There are lots of ways to treat symptoms. We have low energy. Why do we have low energy? So the body's symptoms are often, we're not asking the right questions, which is going to be the next slide in part 2. And slide 9 is we need to start asking the right questions, because what if we're cleansing, clearing, and making balance, and we're suppressing that process with our anti-mucus medication, our anti-fever medication, or our vaccine, or whatever, to suppress natural processes of life? I really want to throw that into the conversation and how important it is to really treat the problem. And we're going to move on to part 2 in just a minute for our slides.